Welcome to the first video, and what we're going to be doing here is just going through some of those photos that you guys have loved. You loved all of them, so we're just going to go through them all real quick. I don't have a lot of behind the scenes because, funny story, I'd originally gone with plan A. That didn't work out, so we plan B'd it, and by the time we got to the location with plan B, that just wasn't working out as well. There just was not enough light. It was a fantastic area, but by the time we got there, the sun was already passing by. It was gone. So we went a little bit deeper over to the river, and we got a couple of shots over there, but that just didn't work as well. So by the time we hit plan D, we were up around the highest point that we could probably find within like 15-20 minutes of where we were in the gorge. So pretty much we're going from the gorge down to Portland where where Rocky Butte is. So to start off, a little bit all over the place, but I'll explain how we got these shots, kind of what we had to go through to get them. So this first one here, we had a fair bit of light, but it was actually really harsh, and so there were a lot of deep shadows that were on Sarah's face. So that's not something that I really enjoy to see, so we fixed it. We actually ended up adding a little bit of fill light to the left side of her face here. Destiny was holding up the strobe. I set it to a pretty low power so that we were able to see the background as well. We were zoomed in pretty far, so everything is really blurred out, even though I have it at a pretty large depth of field. But there were some cars back there, so I wasn't about that, so we just blurred them all out. The second one here, this was actually by the time we hit plan D. This was up at Rocky Butte, and I was so excited to see Mount Hood just on the other side. We had to make sure that we got it, and we got it clean. What we had done was just use the natural light. We didn't even use a reflector for this one. We had her facing into the sun and just got the pose going. It was super quick, and I was super thankful that there weren't a ton of people around. So for the third shot that we have here, we actually had to take out the reflector again, but this time we used an orange gel. The reason for this is to match a little bit better the color, temperature of the sun, and have a little bit more of a cohesive shot. If I was to use just the silver here or the frosted gel, then the light on her face would just be too blue, and it would not be a cohesive shot. There would be a lot of editing there, and just getting it better, getting it right in camera the first time is something that I really strive to do. So we ended up shooting this one on a pretty low power, but we brought the depth of field out pretty far for what I normally shoot. I tried to keep that pretty low, but in this case, I was zoomed in about as far as I could, and being able to get a sharp image in that case, just getting the lashes and everything else in focus would be a little bit more difficult to do. So I made it a little bit wider, deeper, larger, and just rolled with it. Another thing that we ended up doing was actually getting the light a little bit closer to her and turning that power down just a little bit more. The reason for this is so that we could actually shape the light that was coming to her. We ended up using the sun as a hair light and then lighting her face with a strobe. And the reason for that is that we had just a beautiful background off towards the sun, but in front of us not so much. So trying to eliminate that as much as possible was definitely a goal. So what we ended up doing was using that, getting it a little bit closer, and really trying to shape the shadows that were coming off the side of her face. I think that in this case, especially with that dimple, it makes such a big difference having a little bit more shape to the light instead of having it flat, like having it dead on like that there. This next one here, Destiny really needed a break. The light can get pretty heavy. We weren't using stands or anything like that to try and reduce our footprint. So we just went again with natural light. We had Sarah facing into the light, and it does end up giving us a little bit flatter of a tone or of a contrast to the image. But in this case, when you look at the catch lights in her eyes, like, oh my goodness. The catch light is something I live for. It gives soul to the eyes and really adds to the image. And she's got beautiful brown eyes, so that really adds to it. So no reflector used in that one. In this one, we had experimented using a light, but we ended up just going with the light that we had available. It's not orange like the sunset would have been. We actually lost the light by this point in time. We were in what we call blue hour. And so we were experimenting, but it just wasn't looking right. And so we actually ended up just using the natural light. We didn't use a reflector either, but the light that was still coming towards us was coming from this direction. And so it still gives it a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of a contrast to it, but not a ton. Sarah actually said, hey, put the flowers behind the dress, and then we'll put her on the train. It was a pretty good idea. I actually ended up having to remove a lot of glass out of the shot in Photoshop. Did you know that Rocky Butte is covered in glass? Because I do. I know now. This shot here, we had pretty much lost every little bit of light. It was getting pretty dark, and we weren't even able to see the mountain anymore. So we actually ended up digging out the Octabox, the softbox that I have, and started playing with that, because why not? I have it, so might as well pull it out and use it. The awesome thing about it is that I was able to get a little bit more of a shallow depth of field, and that's something that I really love. That's the reason that you can see her eye here, it's the far one, is in focus, and then it starts to fall off as it goes across her face. Actually, it moves kind of this way, but that's the reason that you can see part of the pearl is in focus, and then it moves off to not being so much. The reason that we used the softbox was because of something called the inverse square law. Basically, the closer, the larger the light source is, the faster that it falls off. So we pretty much took it and stuck it right up against her face. You could almost see it in the shot if it weren't so dark. But the reason for that is that you get a little bit more of a shadow, you get some of that definition, and then you only end up seeing what you want to see. So I thought it would be a really fun and neat idea to do. So with the last one here, this was actually a little bit of a production. When I say a little bit, I mean a lot. It actually involved 3 different lights and little bit of polyboard. A couple of pieces of polyboard. 3 pieces of polyboard. Don't judge. So I ended up using 3 lights, 2 just regular old speed lights, kind of the flashes that you would see on many photographers' cameras, and then my strobe, which is actually lighting me right now, because you would think with a nice bright room and daylight balanced light bulbs. I ended up setting was the strobe, and that was a little bit shallower than 45, maybe 35 degrees from the flowers, and was angled down onto them. This was what was creating the shadow going to the left of the frame. Because they came from different brands, I have 2 of the speed lights and 1 strobe. It's not an exact science on how to work everything out. They have 2 different types of power outputs. My strobe, which is lighting me right now, is very incremental. I have decimal points that I can go through and program and tell it, like, hey, we're on about 6.5 power right now out of 9. We're just lighting me. And then the other ones, they go in actual stop increments for their powers. So they have like full power 1 and 64th, 1/128th, that kind of thing. So being able to match these up to what I needed actually took a lot of time and a lot of different shots to see what was happening. Because if I made one too hot, then it would override whatever else I was doing. So mixing all of these together was actually pretty time consuming and actually was pretty difficult. By the time I balanced all the different lights out, I was able to make sure that I had the focus that I wanted, the depth of field that I wanted, and really was able to just combine everything together in camera before I even started editing it. So that's how we ended up getting a few different light sources. Let me know what you thought of this. I know there wasn't a whole bunch behind the scenes to go through, but did the best we could. We didn't have a lot of time, especially since we had to make a few different plans and go to a few different locations. But tell me what you think. Tell me if you enjoyed this at all. If you hate it, go easy on it. But let me know if you want to see future videos with possibly a live shoot or having some more behind the scenes, so that you can actually see what we end up going through in order to have the photos that we want to enjoy. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon.